Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Nitish and this is the part 2 of the Helm series. We'll be talking about how to write your own Helm charts. If you have not watched the part 1 where we have talked about Helm basics, I would highly recommend you going through the part 1 and then coming to this part 2. Now, this is going to be a 44 minutes long video. I assure you that if you watch the video till the very end, I'm pretty sure you're going to have a very good understanding of how to write your own Helm charts. By the end of this video, I have also even taken a look at how other projects like Argo CD has written their Helm charts, and we have finally tried to understand how it made some sense. Okay, one thing that I want to mention that while recording this video, my video output could not be recorded, so you will have just screen visible. I hope that's completely fine. You should be more focused on learning than watching me. Okay, that's okay. But yeah, without any further delay, let's get started. Okay, so understand one thing. Every Helm chart that you're going to see is going to contain some files for you. Okay, so for example, any Helm chart is going to contain this mandatory file called as chart.yaml. That is just a YAML file which is going to contain information about the chart. We'll be taking a look at any Helm chart and I'll tell you how it looks like. Then there's going to be a license file that is simply containing the license for the chart. Then there's going to be a readme file of that chart, like how does this chart look like, how to configure this chart, etc. for you. The important thing is this values.yaml file. There will be a values.yaml file whenever you install a chart or whenever you create a chart by your own. This values.yaml file is going to contain default configuration for you. For example, the values.yaml file can contain the replicas number. And then there will be a values.schema.json file, which is generally optional field. This is generally a JSON schema that is representing a structure for your values.yaml file. Okay, let's say if your Helm chart is depending on some another Helm chart, then that another Helm chart is going to be stored in this charts directory for you. Okay, then there can be CRDs. For example, let's say your Helm chart is installing some CRDs for you. What are CRDs? Custom resource definition. Like, let's say you want to build your own Kubernetes object, not pod, not deployment, because these are inbuilt Kubernetes objects. CRDs will be present in the CRDs folder. What is this template folder is going to do? Template folder is just a directory of templates. Means all I told about it in the previous video that there will be templates folder that is going to contain Kubernetes manifest in a templated format. Then there will be notes.txt. Notes.txt is going to be optional file, which will be a plain text file containing short usage notes. So let's start with creating our own custom chart this time. So in order to create your own Helm chart, you use the command called as helm create. Helm create -h. Let's see the definitions. You can see that this command is going to create a chart directory along with common files for you. For example, if you create foo directory, for example, if there's a foo directory, it's going to create chart.yaml file, it's going to create values.yaml file, it's going to create charts folder for you, templates folder for you, helmignore file for you. We'll be taking a look at it. So let's say I say helm create my chart. You see creating my chart and there's a directory here. Now if you go to the values.yaml file, let's go to the values. You see there's this default configuration, like replica count has been set to 1, image this going to use, etc. Then there's a chart.yaml file that specifies the API version of this chart is v2, the name of this chart, description of the chart, type, version of the application, app version, the version of the chart, etc. If you go to the charts, now this is right now empty, but let's say your my chart would have depend on some other subcharts, then it would have those subcharts would have been stored in the charts directory. Then there's a templates folder that is containing this deployment file, all these things. What are these? We're going to take a look at it. Okay, and you can also see that there's a notes.txt file, etc. You can see that there's a helpers.tpl file as well, where we have defined some templating for you. Okay, we'll be taking a look at this now, how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything here. Okay, let's do that. rm -i my chart templates. Delete everything in the templates folder, and I'm going to remove everything in the values.yaml file. Sounds good now? All right, so now what we have a charts directory, we have a templates directory which is empty, we have a chart.yaml. I don't care about that though. Values.yaml is empty. Okay, so I have put this config map in this templates folder. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to install this chart on my machine, on my cluster, sorry. So helm install, this is the release name I'm going to give, and this is the path of the chart. Sounds good? I'm going to hit enter. What is going to happen? This chart has been installed. Now there's a release that is going on. If I try to look at the config maps, because this is a config map, so let's try to look at the config map. You can see that there's a my chart config map that got created by Helm. Okay, that got created by the Helm already. So if I try to inspect that, you can see that This is a config map. Then these are some annotation that has been added by Helm already for you, and you can see my value hello world got printed. Very simple stuff. Nothing so fancy because we are not using any sort of templating here. So what Helm did was Helm sent this file which was in the templates folder, like configmap.yaml. It sent this file through something called as templating engine. Okay, finally this templating engine will eventually template these Kubernetes components, but as you can see in my config map.yaml, I'm not using any sort of template here. So Helm send this file for you, extracted through the templating engine. Templating engine sees that, okay, this is a simple config map.yaml file, no need to perform any sort of templating because we are not using any fields from the template. What is going to happen next is this templating engine is going to generate files for you, for example config map.yaml in a final format after templating has been applied, and it's going to send to Kubernetes, right? It's going to send to Kubernetes cluster, and it's going to apply those changes for you. That's what simply happened here just now. Sounds good? If you want to see what manifest got installed, you can use helm get manifest, and then you can provide the chart, the release name. So you can see that they in this release, this was the config, this was the Kubernetes manifest that got applied. Sounds good? Okay, let's try to do some templating now. The thing is that using a hard-coded value inside your name field is a bad practice. And these name fields should be unique to the release name, okay? So we might want to generate a name field by inserting the release name here. For example, if I have said my release name is my chart release, then the config map should be my chart release config map. If I said my release name is Nitish release, then the config map should be Nitish release config map, etc. for you. By default, Kubernetes has restricted that the name component, this name field, the value of this name can only be 63 characters for you. Okay, this is because of the limitations to the DNS system. Okay, so we need to make sure that this name field is only having 63 characters. It cannot exceed more than 63 characters for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the release name here. Okay, how I'm going to do that? I'm going to say dot release dot name. What is this? We'll be taking a look, and then simply config map. So what you see here, this is generally called as a template directive. Okay, and this template directive is going to simply inject your release name into this template. Now let's try to install this release now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a new release. My chart, I'm going to say not my chart release, I'm going to say Nitish chart, Nitish release, etc. Nitish release, and then the path to the chart. Sounds good? I'm going to hit enter. Now let's see the config maps here. You can see Nitish-release-config map is created for you. So whatever the release name I passed here, which was Nitish release, automatically this template directive automatically injected that release name here, and then finally obviously this was config map that we used. Sounds good? So this is the basic templating that we did just now. Now you might say, Nitish, I don't want to, like let's say I made a change. Does this mean I'm going to install every sort of release in my Kubernetes cluster? No, you don't have to do that. What you can do is, in order to just test what Kubernetes manifest are going to be rendered by Helm, what you can do is, let's say Helm install my chart release example, and what you can do is --dry run. Okay, let's hit enter. So this is not installed on the Kubernetes cluster. What is happening is that dry run is simply going to generate the manifest for you, like that manifest that can be applied to a Kubernetes cluster. It's basically going to generate the manifest that is going to be rendered by Helm for you, but it's not going to apply those Kubernetes manifest to your Kubernetes cluster. Sounds good? If you want to debug something, let's say there can be some error, you can use this debug flag too, --debug. So you can see that now there are some debug levels. There can be warnings here, etc. for you. So we are going to talk about something called as built-in objects for you. For example, what you just saw here, .release.name. This was a templative directive that automatically injected the release name here for you. Whatever release name that you specified, automatically this value got replaced with the release name. Now there is .release.name, then there is .release.namespace too. So there are different built-in objects for you, okay, that we can take a look at right now. So instead of saying name is this, I can simply also say there's also another built-in object, for example .release.namespace for you. Then there's another object, something called as .release. Let's say is upgrade for you. example. So this is going to be a boolean value. That's if you're performing an upgrade to a release, this value is going to be true. Now similarly, whatever the values that you specified here in your values.yaml file, for example, replicas is equal to 3, all these things, all these replicas, all these values can be specified here too. For example, I can say number of replicas is, let's say I'm adding a new field. You can reference this using a template directory called as dot values. So now dot values dot replicas, because this value was here, this replicas field was here, key was here. So now if I try to run the same command, helm install, you can see that this config map will be applied with the numbers whose value has been set to 3. If you want to get the chart details for you, chart version, and I'm going to do, then you can use the chart object like dot chart dot, let's say, version, etc. I'm going to apply the same stuff. You can see chart version is 0.1.0. Nitish, how is this chart version coming here? If you go to the chart.yaml file, you can see that this is the version that you specified here. If you change it to 0.3.0 and you try to again install it, you can see that this value has been changed to 0.3.0. Sounds good? So these are built-in objects for you, and you get a bunch of built-in objects that you can use. I would recommend you going through the Helm documentation if you're interested to learn more about this. Let's try to add a new field here. Let's say I'm going to say favorite sports is cricket. Very simple. So I'm going to add a favorite sports cricket. I have already added it in values.yaml file, and let's say I added a new field in my config map called as sports. Now in order to use this default, in order to use this favorite sports value from this values.yaml, I can simply say dot values dot favorite sports, etc. Okay, if I try to install the chart again, you can see that sports has been set to cricket. This is the default configuration. But Nitish, what if I want to change this value of sports to, let's say, football? Although now I have defined cricket, but what if I want to change it to something like, let's say, football? One way is you can come here and you can change it. But no, this is not what I want. I want the default value to remain as the cricket, but I want a different value for now. Okay. What you can do here is when you try to install the chart, you can use a flag called as set. So you use the set flag and then you pass the key that is present in the values.yaml whose value you want to change. For example, here I'm going to say favorite sports and I'm going to change this value to football. Hit enter. You can see sports has been changed to football. Nitish, what if I don't use that set flag? If you don't use the set flag, simply the values.yaml it means the values.yaml field is going to be applied here. So remember that whenever you use a set flag, this is going to override your default configuration. So I'm going to say favorite, and this is going to have objects for you. For example, favorite is having sports as cricket, and then drink as Coke, and then actor as Sampi. Now, if you try to run the same command again, you see the values here. Sports is set to empty, number is also set to, number is okay, but sport is set to empty. Why? Because right now there is no favorite sports field. There is no favorite sports field. That's the reason it is empty right now. But Nitish, I want to reference this sports field. It's very simple. Dot values dot favorite dot sports. Simple. If you try to run this, you can see sports has been set to cricket. Now let's talk about something. What if you want to delete a default key? So example, this is a very simple pod definition, and you can see that I have used a liveness prob here. Now, if I go to the liveness prob, you can see that I'm using .values.liveness prob here. If you go to my values.yaml file, you can see that there's a liveness probe that I've set to HTTP get. Now, you can either have HTTP get or you can have exec here. You can't have both. It means I need to delete this key here. If I want to use exec, it means I need to delete this key here. How are we going to do that? Let's see. Let me first try to tell you. So this is a command that I'm going to follow right now. I'm not setting it to null. Okay, this is a command that I'm going to follow. I'm going to set this favorite.sports is equal to let's say football. That's okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this liveness probe dot exec dot command is equal to something like this. Okay, you can see that there's nothing called as exec that I have defined here. Let's try to run this. You can see that exec was added here, was added as a separate entry, but this is wrong. because you can't have both HTTP GET and exec at the same time. You can only have one here, right? So what you need to do is you need to set this HTTP GET field to null here. Okay, so I'm going to do it something like this, where I'm setting the liveness prop.http get is equal to null. So whenever I come here, liveness prop dot HTTP get is equal to null. Now try to hit enter. That key got deleted, and you can see exec got only printed. Okay, so whenever you want to remove a key from your default configuration, always set it to null first using the set flag. So next thing that we're going to see is template functions and pipeline. Okay, template functions and pipelines here. I'll tell you what it means. Okay, so if I try to run this command right now, I have deleted my pod manifest, by the way. If I try to run this right now, you can see that my value is printing as a string here, and everything as a string here. This is a number field, and this is a number field. I mean, this is printing it as a number here. Okay, this is a, for example, number. This is a string. This is a string, etc. But I want to quote this value. Quote means, like, let's say I want to add this quotation marks. So in order to make sure that this field is actually a string field, how can I do that? I can use a function here. I can simply say that quote. Simple stuff. This is a, what is quote? Quote is a function here that is taking some sort of values for you. For example, this replica, for example, not here I want to add. I can add it here, something as quote. Sounds good? I can add it here as well. This is taking a one argument. If I try to run this chart again, install this chart again, you can see sports has this curly braces now. Not curly braces, commas, sorry. Commas for you. Okay, this is explicitly mentioning that sports is a string field, drinks is a string field. Okay, now one thing that people generally do, what they do is, instead of doing it in this way, they use the piping symbol. For example, if you are familiar with Linux, I'm pretty sure you are, you can use a piping symbol here. You can say pipe quote. What is going to happen is the output of this dot values dot favorite dot sports is going to be sent to quote function. Simple terms. Okay, try to install it again. You can see cricket has been printed and slash coke has been printed. Oh, hold on, this is because I'm printing it here. I think this will be good now. Here you go. So drinks with coke and sports as cricket. What is happening? Let's see. So you wrote something like dot values dot sports dot drink, and then you pass it to quote. That's what you did. Now this value is coke. So what is the output? Coke. This is sent to quote function now. Piping means, like, whatever the output that you have got from here, this will be sent as an input to this function, quote here. So now quote is like quote and coke. I mean coke, quote and coke. So now quote sees this function. I have got an argument called as coke. I'm going to output it as coke here. And this is exactly what you got here. Drinks as coke. Now there are some other functions too that you can use. For example, there is a function called as upper that is going to uppercase all the values for you. For example, if there's a sports field that is cricket, it's going to do capital C, capital R, capital I, capital C, capital K, capital E, capital T. Okay, and then finally that cricket value, which is in uppercase format, that will be sent to quote now. So let's try to install this again. You can see that sports has been set to cricket here in the uppercase format. Now, one thing very important, in a lot of charts, you're going to see the default function that is getting used here. I'll tell you how that looks like. Okay, favorite dot drink. Okay, I'm going to remove this field from here. What should be printed? Empty string. Drinks, empty string. But I want that it should, if no value is passed, let's say no field, let's say the default configuration field is not there, I want to use a default value. Default value means if that value doesn't exist there, I want you to use this value as a default value. What you can do is use the default here. If I go to the default, you can see that this is taking an input here. Hold on. You can see that default is taking a default value and then an optional value. So I'm going to pass the default value here, something like T. Okay, if you have not specified that value in the values.yaml file, then use the default value as T. Hit enter. drinks has been set to T, although drink was not defined here. Although drink was not defined here, but we use the default value here. Sounds good? So what happened was, this is the default function. You set it to T here. Sounds good? But this wanted another argument. Then what you did was you got a empty value here. You got an empty value here. Empty value, which is empty string here. You passed it here. You passed another value here. Sounds good? Now default sees, okay, this is empty value and this is T value. I mean, this is the optional value. So this has not been defined. I need to return the default value, which is T here, and then it returned the T. That's what you see. All the drink was not defined, and we were referencing drink here. So it sent a empty string, and then empty string got passed to default value. Default see that you have passed this empty string, so I'm going to use the default value now. Sounds good? This is a default function. That I want to talk about is that operators such as equal to, not equal to, greater than, lesser than, etc. These are also implemented as functions in the Helm charts or in the Helm templates. Let's take a look at right now. So if you go to the equal function, and let's say I try to just write equal here, okay, you can see equal is returning true or false value here. Okay, so I'm going to say equal to, and I'm going to say T is, and then I'm going to pass another value, which is, or let's say it is like this only. What should be returned here? T, and then you see pass the empty value here from here. This is going to give you false. So what is drinks going to become? Drinks is going to become false here. You see, drinks has been set to false here. Now let's take another look at flow control. Flow control simply means like if something happens, do this, otherwise do this. You know, like your if-else statements. That's what we're going to talk about, how you can use this. Okay. So a general syntax for your flow control looks like this. For example, you pass the if information, then you pass the pipeline. Pipeline simply here means, for example, if you're using equal operator, you can think of it like that. If you're using, you can say if equals T and T and then empty string. Okay. Then do something else if other pipeline, for example, you can use equal function saying T as T, and then you can use the default case. If nothing of this work, then execute this thing. Then execute the default case, which is the else condition here. If I'm going to remove these things first, so you don't also see. I'm going to remove this, etc. So now what is the condition? I'm going to say the condition is if equals, not empty, equals dot values dot favorite dot sports is cricket, then in that case do something. I want you to add mug is equal to true. Just a random example. Here you go. You can see that mug is equal to true here, but you can see there's an indentation error. Right now the mug is printing here, so if I do it something this way, I just put some indentation here, then it's going to print in correct manner. But you can see now there's a space here at the starting. I don't want that. We'll be taking a look at it, how to resolve this. Understand this. When you see something like this, like curly braces, and then you see, the hyphen has been added. So this simply means that the white spaces should be chomped left. Okay. And when you see something like on the right side of the dash, on the left side of the dash, it simply means, I mean, if when you see something like this, the dash is on the right side, it simply means that white spaces to the right should be consumed. Okay. So example, if you see something like this, it means trim left white spaces and print 3. Okay. So trim these 3 spaces on the left side and print 3. While if you see something like this way, when you have not added any space, if you see I have not added any sort of space here, it simply means don't trim any white spaces and simply prints -3 here. Okay, don't get confused here. This is simply referencing a number here, whereas this thing is not a number. It's referencing this. This simply means that you have to chomp those white spaces to the left here, whereas this thing is simply a number. Don't get confused here. Okay. In order to remove this, what I can do is I need to chomp these white spaces to the left first. I can simply add it here. Sounds good? I have added it here. But I also need to add it at the last. I also want to chomp the white spaces to that are at the end. So I can add it here. If I try to run this, You can see that now mug has been set to true here. So we already talked about if now. Let's talk about something called as with. We can also do the same stuff with. But what is going to happen with is, if you use the with keyword, this is going to limit the scope for you. I'll show you an example here. I'm going to use the with here. So let me remove this extra things first. Here you go. So now I'm going to say with dot values dot favorite. Nitish, what about the scope? What did you do? I'm just going to limit the scope to the dot favorite. Only these things can be accessed with the with block now. So I can simply refer to sports as dot sports. If I try to run this now, you can see that sports has been set to cricket here. What you did was you limited the scope to you just limited the scope, that you simply said that I can only and only access variables that I have defined like sports, actor, that are present in this favorite, that are part of this favorite. I can't access something called as replicas now. I'll tell you, I'll just show you right now. Replicas dot values dot replicas. Let's see. See, nil pointer. You can't access that. Nitish, what if I want to use this replicas too? Then just limit the scope to values. Like anything that is in the values, I can access that. Now if you do this dot values, this will work, but this will not work. You got an error? I'll show you. Dot values dot sports. Sorry, dot values, not dot values. You can simply say, you can simply, hold on. What you can say is dot favorite dot sports, and here you can simply say dot replicas. See, sports has been set to cricket and replicas has been set to 3 here. Sounds good. Now you limited the scope to values only. It means everything that I can access here. Now you don't have to use the dot values every time. Nitish, can I access the release name? Let's see. Release dot name. You can't access the release name because that's a part of different scope. Access the release name outside the with. You can see that you can access the release name here, my chart -release. Okay, but you can't access it here. Example, if I do it something this way, you can see you can't access that. But now you'll be like, Nitish, I only want to access the release name inside this scope. If you want to access that outside of some another scope, what you can use is $sign here. You can simply say dollar and then dot release dot name. Then you can see you can access that release. Now let's take a look at how are you going to range over the values. For example, I have defined here technologies, which is a type of array, and these they have this elements like DevOps, backend, frontend, AI, ML, etc. How are we going to access each of these elements and put them in a config map? So I can simply access it using the range function. For example, I have set technologies and I'm going to range over this dot values dot technologies here. And then with the help of this, I'm simply accessing each element here. For example, when it comes to DevOps, then I'm going to use a title function. So if you go to title function, this is going to convert string to a title case. If I try to execute this, you can see that technologies has been set to DevOps, then backend, frontend, AI, ML, etc. So now one thing that I want to talk about is variables here. Okay, so as you can see, I was using this release name. I used the $sign in order to access the release name that was outside the scope of dot values. Okay, what I can do is I can declare a variable here. Let's say I want to declare the variable any called as release that is set to release.name value. How are you going to do that? Let's take a look. So I'm going to declare this variable here. I'm going to say release name is equal to dot release dot name. Sounds good. I have declared a simple release name variable here. Now I can use this release name variable here. Oops, sorry, I need to pass the correct name here. release. If I try to apply it, you can see that now you can access the release name here. So what you did, you just you declared a new variable here. Declare a new variable the end assign release name value. So there are there are three things that you learn. First, what you can do in order to, if you want to print this release value, you can put this outside the scope, but that's not something we want. If in case you want to print the release, if you want to access a variable in another scope that is not a part of that scope, you can use the dollar sign. Or what you can do, third approach, is create a variable and declare its value outside the scope, and then you can use that. Then you can reference that value inside the with scope. Nitish, what if I want to get the index and the value for this? For example, you have come from the programming background, you know that how for loops work. So similarly, range loop can work in this way too. What I'm going to do is I can specify the index and the value to specific variables. Let's take a look how we're going to do that. So I'm going to say range index comma let's say value is equal to this. Very simple. Now I need to access these index and value variables. How am I going to do that? I'm going to simply say index and value. I don't need this. I'll probably just do it like this. That's all. So now I can access these values here. Let's try to run this. You can see the technologies 0 has got printed, 1 has got printed, 2 has got printed, 3, 4, etc. got printed. This is how you access the individual values too using variables. Okay, now is very important and interesting thing that I want to talk about, which is named templates. So far, what we did was we defined our templates here only, like inside our values.yaml file. Simply, we defined everything that we want to do and simply reference that in our config maps.yaml. Okay, remember in the starting we see a helpers.tpl file. That's what we're going to do right now. So every template that you see will be in this format. There's going to be defined function that's going to take a template name here. For example, you can say that Nitish template, etc. And then the body of the template. Body of the template simply means what you want to do. For example, I can range here. I can declare some variables here. And then instead of doing all of these things here, I define all of these things in a template and simply reference this template inside my config map.yaml. So I am going to first go in the templates folder and create a file called as helpers.tpl. Remember the syntax. It always starts with underscore helpers.tpl. So remember that any file that is starting with underscore, they're not going to be, Helm assumes that they are not Kubernetes manifest for you, or basically assume that they do not have a manifest inside. Sounds good? So these files like underscore that are starting with underscore, these are not rendered to Kubernetes. Okay, these are not rendered to Kubernetes objects. Now this is a helpers.tpl. Let's define a template here. So this is a syntax I already told about. I'm going to use a define the name of the template, and I'm going to use this my chart dot labels. This is a template names, and I want to declare some labels here. How I'm going to do that? Very simple. I'm going to say labels generator is my chart. Let's say my chart example. I can also say date is I can use a date. For date I can use this function now, and date, or probably I can pass this to HTML date, etc. Very simple. I have created a template called a mychart.labels that is simply adding this labels. That is simply adding this field. Now Nitish, how I'm going to use this labels now? How I'm going to use this template that you have defined here? Let's come back here. You see there is no labels defined here, right? There's no labels defined here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reference it here. Template, and then pass the name of the template. What is the name of the template? mychart.labels. mychart.labels. Sounds good. Now let's try to execute this. So you can see labels generator set to my chart and date set to this one has been executed here. Sounds good. Now remember that if in case you don't want to define it here, you can obviously define it here too. In your config map.yaml itself, you define it at the starting. If I try to run this, You can see that labels has been added here. Let's say there are only 5 templates that you want to define. So you're going to add those templates in this config map.yaml. Then this file is going to become messy for you. So it's a good practice to define these templates separately in a file called as helpers.tpl. So define the template. How are you going to use this template to render Kubernetes manifest? You simply use the template function. Let's say I define another thing called as chart version in this template. How are you going to do that? Chart version dot chart dot version, etc. Let's try to execute this again. You see, chart version is printing as null. When you define this template, you cannot access these the values that are outside the scope. For example, .chart .version, you cannot access that, or .release .name, etc. Okay, because these are in another scope. What if, but Nitish, I want to execute this. How can I do that? So if you want to execute this, what you can specify is the context here. I want to set the context to my root. Root means like everything, dot values, dot release, dot chart, dot etc. Everything that is included in these template directives, just send it to me. Okay. Now if I try to execute it, my chart version has been set to 0.3.0. So when I did template, you see the context was set here. When it by default, when I did not set the context was set to only the labels here, which was these fields only. Drinks dot values dot favorite dot sports, and I'm going to remove this first. Let's see. You see, drink was not there, but if I want to access that, how can I do that? By using the context, by setting the context here. Now if I set the context here, I can access that. So now I defined another template called as my chart.app that simply references the chart name, and the chart version here. Okay. Now if I want to use this template, I simply set template my chart.app, but since I want to access the values outside the scope, I set the context to root here dot. If I try to execute this, it executed successfully, but you can see that there's an error. I mean, the indentation is wrong. You can see app version is on the data side, which is not correct. We want. So what we want in this case is we want the indentation to be properly formatted, right? We want the indentation to be properly formatted. Now the thing is, template is just an action. Okay, there's no way to pass the output of a template call to some another function. For example, something like quote, etc. Whatever you want to do, you cannot do that because template is not a function. Remember that template is not a function. Template is simply an action here. Okay. Now, what you can do instead of using template, and most projects do that, is use the include here. Include is a function. So now you can pass the include value to some another function. So I'm going to pass this, since let's try to execute this first. Again, the same error. But since I want to perform an indentation, I can use another function called as nIndent. And I'm going to set the number to 2 here. Let's try to execute this. You see, indentation works perfectly well. You use the include here. So whenever you say template include, it simply means include the value from this template. Okay. Now let me show you an example here. For example, if you go to the Argo Helm chart again, now if you go to templates folder, and if you go to the helpers.tpl file, you can see that they have defined templates here. I think now you can understand this. You see, they are using if value. Now you understand what is this. This is a pipeline that they're setting. They're saying that if in the values field redis.serviceaccount.create has been set, it means it can be a Boolean value, right? If this field has been set, right, then use this default value. Now they have used the default function here. Okay, and then they have passed the first value here. Then they use this include here. What is this include doing? Understand this. Let's try to understand this slowly. They're saying if dot values dot redis dot service account dot create, if this value is set to true, then execute this thing. What is it doing? It's using first of all default function. It means this is the default value of this function, and this is the optional value. Remember when we talked about optional value? So if dot values dot redis dot service account dot name has been used, then this value is going to be used. Very simple. Think of it. If you have service account creation set to true, then obviously you're going to use a service account name that you have set there. But if it has been not, if that value is empty there, then get the value from this thing here. What is this thing, Nitish? Think of it. This is include, and this is the another thing. It means you're calling a template here. Then then get the value from this argo cd.redis.fullname template. Let's go at template file. Let's try to go to our template file here. If you go to the helpers.tpl, you see argo cd.redis.fullname, then execute this template. It again has if conditions, else conditions, etc. This is how you render these Kubernetes manifest for you. Cluster role.yaml. Now you can understand this. Oh, they are using this if condition first. They're checking if the create cluster roles value has been set to true, then only this field is going to be applied. Then only the cluster role.yaml is going to be applied, which is very simple. If the create cluster role has been set to true, then only you're going to apply this manifest. Right? Now you understand how this is working. Now you understand what is if. Now you understand this is they're using include. It means they're calling a template that has been defined in helpers.tpl, or that template can also be defined here. Okay. So what you can do is in your note, whenever you install a chart, the content that is going to be displayed after the chart has been installed will be from the notes.txt. For example, you can say in the notes.txt, thank you for installing my chart, and then you can reference here. For example, .chart.name. I hope you have a good day installing the .chart. Installing the app version, etc. If I try to install this, see, once that chart was installed, this is going to be installing. This is going to be displayed. Notes. Thank you for installing my chart. Right. Then you're installing my chart. This is the name of the chart. I hope you have a good day installing the app version 1.16.0. For example, in the Argo CD, they have defined this notes.txt file. Let's take a look at it. They have defined this notes.txt. They have mentioned, so you can use again the if conditions, whatever you want to do, you can use this in the notes.txt file. Right? You can also execute commands if you want to in your notes.txt file, for example, to learn what manifests are installed. Execute what? Execute helm get manifest and dot, what is helm get manifest release name, then dot release dot name. Right? If I now try to install it, they're saying to get what manifest installed, execute helm get manifest. Let's try to execute this command, copy this. You see, this is what we get installed. So what is this .helmignore file? It is used to specify files that you don't want to include in your Helm chart. Okay. So let's say your Helm chart is in including .get file, .etc, whatever files, and you don't want to include them, you can simply reference those files in the .helmignore. Sounds good? Alright, I hope you guys have liked this video. If you guys do, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and before I see you in the next video, the part 3 is going to be pretty interesting again, which is the last part where we're building a Go application, deploy it to Kubernetes cluster, and using Helm, we'll be deploying it to multiple environments like dev, staging, prod, and we'll be seeing how all these templates finally make sense in our Go project as well. So yeah, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.